He vomited. Bound to the bed, his body bent at impossible angles. This incident dates back to 1949 in Maryland, USA. A quiet suburban town. Nothing unusual ever happened there, until the story of a boy named Robbie changed everything. Robbie was only 14 when the strange events began. He lived with his Aunt Harriet after losing his parents at an early age. Harriet, unlike most women of her time, was obsessed with the paranormal. She collected books about the occult, studied strange rituals, and occasionally helped people who wished to contact their dead loved ones. Robbie often watched her with fascination. The idea that he might speak to his mother and father, even for a moment, consumed him. Again and again, he begged Harriet to let him try. Finally, she gave in. She handed him a Ouija board. At first, it was harmless. Robbie spent hours with the board, calling out to his parents. He asked the same questions over and over. Sometimes the planchette moved, slowly, deliberately. Robbie believed it was them, but his behavior began to shift. He grew moody, irritable, aggressive. Family members noticed his temper snapping over small things. He hardly ate. His nights were restless. Then suddenly Harriet passed away. Some said it was natural causes, but to Robbie, it felt like punishment. He refused to accept her death. He clung to the Ouija board, using it every night, no longer just to reach his parents, but to bring Harriet back. And that is when the haunting began. The family reported scratching sounds inside the walls, as though something with claws moved through them. At night, Robbie swore he heard voices calling his name, sometimes men, sometimes women, crying, screaming, and then sudden bursts of laughter that echoed through empty rooms. Shadows moved across his bedroom even when the lights were on. Once his relatives saw long claw marks appear on his skin in real time, thin red lines rising on his arms, his back, his chest. No one was touching him. The family was terrified, but Robbie seemed almost drawn to it. He was losing himself to something he didn't understand. One evening, Robbie was left alone in the house. That was when the haunting reached its peak. The doors and windows began slamming violently, not at random, but in a rhythmic pattern. The lights flickered until they nearly burst. Robbie froze as two black figures appeared in the corners of his room. They circled him, slowly like predators. Panicked, he ran into Harriet's old bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Inside, he saw something that nearly broke his mind. On the bed sat a woman, brushing her long black hair. From behind, she looked just like Harriet. His heart lifted for a second, but when she turned, her face was rotten, flesh hanging loosely, crawling with insects. Her eyes were pale white, her smile stretched unnaturally wide. She laughed, a shrill, broken sound, and hissed Robbie's name. Before he could run, the doorway darkened. A demonic figure stood there. Its fangs glistened, its eyes glowed red, and its body twisted like a shadow given flesh. Robbie felt paralyzed, as if the thing had him in its grip. The demon bent down, grabbed a cat that had wandered in, and tore it apart with its teeth. The sound of bones cracking filled the room. When Robbie's family returned, they found him not as a boy, but as something else. His voice was deep, guttural, not his own. He screamed at them, cursed them, fought like a wild animal. They tied him to the bed in desperation. Soon after, priests were called. The moment the holy men entered, Robbie laughed in a voice that didn't belong to him. He spat insults in languages he never learned, mocking them, mocking God. When the first drops of holy water touched his skin, his eyes rolled back until they were completely white. His face twisted into something grotesque. His body convulsed, and the entire room began to shake. Furniture slid across the floor on its own. The priests realized they weren't dealing with a single spirit. They were facing many. The priest prayed over him, but Robbie's screams drowned out their voices. At one point, bloody marks carved themselves into his flesh, words and symbols that no one understood. A large X appeared across his chest. The priest explained its meaning. Not one demon, but 10. 10 entities fought for control of the boy. The sessions grew darker. Robbie's body defied all sense of reality. He crawled across the ceiling, clinging like an insect. His head twisted backward, his laughter guttural and inhuman. He spoke fluent Latin, a language he had never studied. At times, his voice split into several, 10 voices speaking at once, overlapping, arguing, screaming. Bound to the bed, his body bent at impossible angles. He vomited a thick, black liquid that smelled of decay. The priest pressed on, reciting prayers, pressing the crucifix against his skin. Each time, Robbie shrieked as though burning alive. Hours passed, then days. Every session ended with him collapsing into exhaustion, only for the demons to return stronger the next night. The final exorcism nearly broke everyone in the house. As the priest chanted, Robbie's body lifted from the bed, levitating, thrashing in midair. The walls cracked, plaster falling in chunks. The sound of scratching filled the entire house, as though hundreds of claws dragged across every surface. Suddenly, Robbie let out a piercing scream. The room grew ice cold. Every light shattered at once, and then silence. His body dropped onto the bed, motionless. When the priest rushed to him, they found his chest rising slowly. He was alive. The next morning, Robbie awoke with no memory of what had happened. He was weak but calm. His eyes no longer carried that strange, unnatural glare. Over the following weeks, he began to return to himself. The possessions never returned, but his family, those who had seen his body twist, heard his voice split into many, watched him crawl across the ceiling, they were never the same. And the priests who stood in that room, who faced 10 demons in the body of a child, some of them never spoke of it again. Others left the priesthood entirely. The house where it all happened still stands, quiet, empty. But those who pass by claim that sometimes, if the night is silent enough, you can hear faint scratching sounds inside the walls, as if something still waits there.